The baby shower smelled like lavender and buttercream. I remember that first, the way the scent curled around the lace-draped tables and pastel balloons like something safe, something sacred. We held it in my sister's backyard under an ivory tent, the kind brides use for garden weddings. There were sunflowers in mason jars, lemon tarts, women with painted nails touching my belly, as if I were more miracle than woman. I had worn a blush pink wrap dress that floated around my ankles and showed just enough of my bump to feel beautiful, but not exposed. I'd felt proud that day, not just of the growing life inside me, but of the life I thought I had built. Mark had been attentive all morning, his hand lingering on the small of my back, his smile wide and easy. For one slivered moment, I thought, this is it. This is the dream. And then the toast came. Mark stood up beside me, champagne glass in one hand, the other casually resting on my shoulder like a placeholder. He cleared his throat, waited for the giggles to quiet. Everyone turned to him. My mother, my aunts, my childhood friend Emily, who had flown in from Seattle just for this. I watched him, eyes soft, waiting for a sweet, forgettable toast. Instead, he raised his glass and said, "I just want to thank Claire for being the vessel that's carrying my son into this world." The word hit like a slap muffled in velvet. Vessel. There was laughter. Light, social, unsure. I laughed too, I think. I can't be sure. But inside, something cracked. I felt it the way you feel a plate shatter in another room. Sharp, final, and far away. Later, I stood in the kitchen alone, watching the last of the guests trail down the driveway. My sister was packing leftovers. I couldn't stop hearing it. The vessel, like I was a jar on a shelf, a container. Not a mother, not a partner, not even a woman. When I asked him about it later, he was drunk, smirking on the couch, one arm flung, over the back like he'd just hosted a Super Bowl party. "It's just biology, babe," he said, sipping from a beer bottle he didn't need. "Let's not overthink things." He didn't look at me. That hurt the most. He said the words, but not to me, as though he were explaining a concept to someone across the room. I didn't cry that night. I remember that vividly. I just lay in bed beside him, stiff and cold, counting the kicks in my belly, wondering if our child could feel my heartbreak. Then came the morning. Mark had fallen asleep with his phone on the dresser, the screen still glowing. I didn't mean to look. I didn't want to look. But my hand moved before my mind caught up. Maybe some deep part of me already knew. The phone was unlocked. There were messages. A woman named Jules. Photos of her in hotel mirrors. His favorite. Black lingerie. The one I had thrown away when I got too pregnant to wear it. Voice notes. Breathy and secretive. And then the final punch. Simple as a whisper. "She's just the carrier, right?" Nothing more. That word again. Carrier. Vessel. I sat there for a long time. My hands trembling. The phone still warm. My baby kicked again. Soft but certain. Like he was reminding me he was still there. Still mine. The man snoring beside me had carved out my womanhood with a toast. He didn't see me anymore. Maybe he never had. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I just stared at the sunlight creeping in through the curtains, crawling slowly over the nursery door. Inside, that room were dreams we had painted together. But now, each one felt like a lie written in pastel. People say love is blind, but I think it's more like looking through stained glass. Everything looks beautiful until you realize you're standing in a cathedral someone else built for themselves, and you're just lucky to be allowed in. That's how it felt when I met Mark. It was at a networking event I almost skipped. I just ended a long, unraveling relationship with a man who made silence into punishment and apologies into currency. I was tired, raw. But my friend Naomi had begged me to come, promising cocktails and conversation, not commitment. And then there he was, Mark. He had that kind of easy charm that made people lean in without realizing it. Tan suit. Watch that. Glinted like ambition. He made eye contact like he was peeling back layers, and when he laughed, people laughed too. Just to feel close to whatever warmth he radiated. "You look like trouble," he'd said, smirking as he passed me a glass of wine, the kind a man should thank God for. I remember blushing. I hadn't blushed in years. He was attentive in ways I'd never known. Texted good morning and good night. Showed up with takeout from the Italian place I once mentioned in passing. He made me feel chosen. After so much invisibility, being seen felt like water after a drought. But looking back, I realize now, Mark didn't see me. He saw what I could become in his world. A softer version, more grateful, easier to mold. When he asked me to move in with him in the suburbs just 8 months in, I said yes. I left my small but vibrant publishing job in the city, convinced I could freelance. "We'll build something slower, sweeter," he promised. He kissed my forehead when I packed up my books, but he didn't offer to help me carry the boxes. The first thing I noticed was how quiet the neighborhood was. Birds and lawn mowers, mailboxes lined up like mouths that never opened. I tried to keep working, but the energy was different, muffled. Like I'd fallen under a thick blanket and forgot the way out. I bought long skirts, traded heels for ballet flats. My red lipstick began to feel too loud for our farmers' market Saturdays. Mark liked me natural, he said, running his fingers through my hair when I left it unstyled. He called me his lucky charm, said I brought him peace. But it didn't feel peaceful. It felt small. Every time I brought up going back to work full-time, he changed the subject. "We're fine, babe. You don't need to hustle anymore." But I wanted to. I missed the rush, the deadlines, the noise, the person I had been before, all the quiet. When my mother passed, I collapsed on the kitchen floor, gasping through sobs I didn't know were in me. He stood over me silently, then handed me a glass of water and said, "Your sisters will take care of the arrangements, right?" I stared at him then, trying to find a flicker of the man I thought I loved. But there was only impatience in his eyes, like grief was inconvenient. Still, I stayed. God, I stayed. I convinced myself that this was adulthood, that sacrifices were part of love, that maybe I was lucky. He didn't hit me. He didn't scream. He made dinner sometimes. He bought me gifts on birthdays. So what if he talked over me in conversations, or corrected me in front of his friends, or never once asked about the manuscript I used to write before moving in? He said I was lucky, and somewhere along the way, I started believing it. Naomi once pulled me aside at a dinner party and whispered, "You know he talks at you, not to you, right?" I laughed it off, said she was being dramatic. But her words lodged somewhere deep, a small stone inside my chest that never quite dissolved. And then, the baby. Pregnancy felt like redemption. Like maybe finally, I had purpose again. Mark was attentive, in his way. He rubbed my feet. He made sure I took my vitamins. But he never talked about me. Just the baby, his son, his heir. I should have known something was wrong when he framed my ultrasounds. Not for our room, for his office. Still, I clung to the glow. I painted the nursery in pale blue and ivory. I washed tiny socks and folded onesies with the reverence of a woman holding her future in her hands, until the toast. Until the word vessel broke the illusion into sharp little pieces. Now, looking back, I see every compliment as a chain link. Every lucky charm as another knot in the leash. I gave up my job, my city, my voice, and eventually, my sense of self. And the worst part? I gave it all willingly, thinking it was love. The morning after the baby shower felt like a hangover, but not the kind that fades with aspirin and water. This one settled into my bones, a dull ache behind my ribs, under my skin, in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. I didn't sleep much that night. Mark had fallen asleep instantly, snoring with his back turned toward me, as if the evening had been ordinary. As if he hadn't reduced me to a vessel in front of 40 people I once called family. The words still echoed. In my mind, hard and clinical. A vessel, a container, something you use, then discard. When the morning sun filtered through our white curtains, pale and forgiving, I tried to find him in the kitchen. Instead, I found his empty cereal bowl in the sink, milk ringed at the edges like a careless goodbye. He was already gone. No note. No coffee left brewing. Just silence. I stood in the kitchen in my softest robe, the one with tiny lavender flowers I used to think made me feel pretty. I stared at the bowl for a long time before I picked it up. My hand trembled and the milk sloshed, cold and sour-smelling. I poured it down the drain and listened to it vanish. When he came home that night, sometime around 10, I was sitting on the couch, rubbing my belly in slow circles. Our son kicked once, like a knock on a locked door. Mark dropped his keys into the bowl by the door and looked at me like I was interrupting his evening. "Where were you?" I asked, voice quiet. "Work," he said, shrugging off his jacket. "All day?" He tossed his phone onto the counter, didn't even flinch. "Claire, don't start." I saw the messages, Mark. I saw the pictures, the voice notes. She called me the carrier. My voice broke. "You didn't even deny it." He ran a hand through his hair and let out an annoyed sigh, like I'd asked about his fantasy football team again. "You're hormonal. You're overthinking. She's just a flirt from work. We joke around." "She said you told her I'm just the carrier." My voice cracked on the word. "Is that a joke to you?" He walked past me. "Don't do this. You always twist things." I laughed once, sharp and bitter. "You called me a vessel, in front of everyone. That wasn't a twist. That was your truth, wasn't it? You're pregnant. You're tired. You're being dramatic," he muttered, pouring himself a drink like he needed it more than I did. That was it. No apology. No remorse. Not even the decency of a good lie. He didn't sleep in our bed that night. He claimed he fell asleep on the couch watching TV. But I heard the click of a phone screen, the soft buzz of a message received, and later, the creak of the front door closing quietly. He didn't come home the next night. I called him 6 times. Each one rang until voicemail. The 7th time, I didn't leave a message. I just sat in the nursery, surrounded by pastel walls and folded baby clothes, and tried to breathe. I laid down on the floor and looked up at the mobile hanging from the ceiling. Tiny stars, felt clouds, a smiling moon. I had picked it out the same week I ordered matching pajamas for the hospital bag. I had believed in the picture, the happy family, the quiet joy. Now it all looked like a lie sewn in soft cotton. The next morning I walked into our bedroom, already bracing for what I might not find. No note. No shirt draped over the chair. Just the hollow echo of someone's absence. I went to the bathroom and turned on the light. And that's when I saw her. The woman in the mirror. She looked like me, but undone. Her eyes were red-rimmed, the skin beneath them bruised from too many nights pretending she was fine. Her lips were dry, her hair limp. Her wedding ring, once a source of pride, a symbol of belonging, looked like it belonged to someone else. The skin beneath it was slightly bruised. I hadn't noticed how Hard I'd been clenching my fists, I touched it. The metal was warm from my skin, but it felt foreign, like a chain I hadn't realized I wore. I slipped it off. My hand felt lighter, but not free. I opened Mark's drawer, looking for, I don't know, proof? Closure? Maybe a reason to scream. That's when I found it, a jewelry box. New, sleek, black velvet. My heart knew before my mind did. The box clicked open with a softness that felt cruel. Inside, a delicate silver necklace. Minimalist, modern, not my style. On the back of the pendant were initials etched in soft cursive. Not mine. A sob rose in my throat, not loud, not dramatic, just final. A sound that didn't need an audience. A tear spilled and traced the curve of my cheek, warm against cold skin. And then, silence. I sat on the edge of the tub, the necklace still in my hand. The baby kicked again. Not hard, just a flutter. A reminder. I looked down and laid a hand on my belly. I will not let you grow up seeing this, I whispered. My voice was shaky, but the words rang solid, like the first note in a song I had forgotten how to sing. The woman in the mirror was still broken, still tired. But now her eyes had changed. There was something in them, a flicker, a flame. I would cry again. I would ache again. But something had shifted. The pain was still there. Yes. But now it had a purpose. I had been the vessel. But I was about to become something else entirely. It was 4:03 a.m. when I zipped the last corner of the suitcase. The sound felt too loud in the stillness, like a zipper unsealing my former life. Mark was still asleep on the couch downstairs, phone clutched to his chest like a secret he didn't think I'd already uncovered. I didn't wake him. Not because I was afraid, but because I was done giving him the dignity of my pain. I packed slowly, deliberately. 1 pair of worn white sneakers, 2 maternity dresses I didn't loathe, my journal, my old laptop, the one I hadn't opened in a year, and a manila folder, thick with printed messages, screenshots, and photos. Proof. Not for him. For me. For our son. I left my wedding ring on the bathroom counter, beside the toothbrush he never replaced. A note lay folded on the kitchen table, next to the mug that still had the lipstick stain from yesterday morning. I didn't write much. Just enough. Don't call me. I won't answer. We'll be fine without you. I slipped the keys into my coat pocket and walked out into the darkness. The air was crisp and biting, still wet with dew and memory. The silence outside was different than the one inside our house, less suffocating, more sacred. I stood on the porch for a moment, hand on my stomach, and whispered, "We're going." The drive took 3 hours, long enough for the sky to blush from black to lavender, long enough to cry once, scream once, and then fall quiet, for good. I didn't stop for gas, didn't check my phone, just drove with my knuckles pale on the wheel and the road unraveling like ribbon beneath me. The cottage sat nestled beside a lake, half hidden by trees that swayed like they were exhaling. It had been left to me by my Aunt Lydia, a quiet woman who died of breast cancer 4 years earlier, and who once told me, "Sometimes you run because you have to, not because you want to." I never understood that until now. The house smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. Dust danced in shafts of light that slipped between faded curtains. The furniture was old, but clean. There was a quilt folded at the end of the bed. A photograph of Aunt Lydia on the mantel. Smiling with a glass of lemonade in her hand, I stood in the doorway for a long time before I stepped inside. And when I did, I collapsed on the couch and wept into the fabric until it felt like my lungs might collapse. Then, silence. No husband. No footsteps upstairs. No phone buzzing with apologies that never came. Just me. And him. The tiny flutter of life inside me. The days passed like mist. I lived slowly. Ate toast and soup. Sat on the porch with my swollen ankles propped on a stool. Watched the lake reflect the sky like it was trying to remember who it used to be. Wrote letters to my son. Long, meandering ones. I told him about my mother, how she made the best peach pie and smelled like sandalwood. I told him about music and books and the way lavender blooms in late spring. Some nights I watched old home videos. My mother brushing my hair, my father lifting me onto his shoulders. The crackle of VHS static made it all feel like a dream someone else had. I cried until I was empty. Then I cried some more. One afternoon, I wandered into the small town square and found the library. It was quiet and warm, tucked between a bakery and a thrift shop. That's where I met Ruth. She was in her 60s, maybe older, wore floral cardigans and smelled faintly of cinnamon. She looked at me with eyes that had already seen too much, and didn't ask a single question. Instead, she said, "You look like someone who needs soup," and handed me a thermos from her lunch bag. The next day, she gave me a stack of books, all written by women, all dog-eared and underlined. "You'll know when you're ready," she said. I started sketching again. At first, it was just lines, shapes, the edge of a tree, the curve of a wave. But my hands remembered. And slowly, so did my heart. I drew the necklace I found in Mark's drawer, and then drew flames around it. I drew my wedding ring lying on the kitchen counter, then turned it into a birdcage. One night, I drew myself, barefoot and pregnant, standing in the lake, arms open, face turned toward the moon. The next morning, I hung it on the wall above my bed. Every time the baby kicked, I whispered, "We're okay. We're safe." I promise, I didn't know what came next. I had no plan, no map. But for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of the silence, because the silence wasn't the absence of love. It was the beginning of it. The night Elias came into the world, the sky cracked open with a storm, the kind that shakes window panes and makes you believe in omens. The hospital was small, just 6 rooms and a humming vending machine near the nurse's station. No polished marble floors or smiling family members with gift bags. Just me, sweating through a borrowed nightgown, breathing like I'd forgotten how to exhale. Ruth drove me there. Her hands were steady on the wheel, though I saw the worry behind her glasses. She stayed until they took me in, then waited all night in the hallway, crocheting and sipping cold coffee. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever known. It wasn't just physical. It was ancestral. Like I was birthing not only a child, but every piece of myself I'd buried to please a man who didn't deserve any version of me. I screamed, I swore, I cried. But then, he arrived. Tiny, red, wailing. So alive. They laid him on my chest, and the world hushed. His eyes were closed, but his fist curled around my finger like he already knew me. "Elias," I whispered. "Your name is Elias." It had been my mother's middle name. Her legacy now lived in the curl of his lip, the softness of his breath. Something inside me shifted, not suddenly, not like an earthquake, more like thawing ice. I stayed in the hospital for 2 days. No visitors, no phone calls, just me and Elias, learning each other. I counted his toes, memorized the rhythm of his sleep sighs, and I promised him, "I will never let anyone make you feel small." Back at the cottage, everything smelled different. The air felt new, softer. I was exhausted beyond words. My body still ached. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I started therapy 2 weeks later. The clinic was in a converted house, with yellow siding and a chime on the door that jingled like wind through a dream. My therapist's name was Dr. Sims. She had silver streaks in her dark hair and never once looked at me with pity. The first session, I cried for 40 minutes straight. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet, endless leaking, like my body had decided to mourn what my mouth couldn't yet name. She didn't rush me. Didn't tell me I was brave, just said, "That makes sense." And it did. We talked about control, how it often hides in kindness, how emotional abuse wears disguises. She asked me, "When did you first start disappearing?" I didn't even have to think. The day he told me I was lucky he chose me. Week by week, I began to return to myself. I sketched between feedings, made tea in silence, took Elias on long walks wrapped in a sling against my chest. He liked the sound of the wind. One morning, while he napped on my shoulder, I posted one of my sketches anonymously online, a woman standing barefoot at the edge of a cliff, holding a paper heart in her hands. It went viral. Messages poured in. Orders followed. Commissions. I created an online shop under the name Salt and Fern. It felt like the parts of me that survived. The sting of salt, the gentleness of growth. Money started coming in. Not much at first, but enough. Enough to feel the shift. I bought myself a ring. Silver. Simple. With a small amethyst in the center, February's birthstone. My month. My name. It wasn't for marriage. It was for me. The first thing I'd worn in years that wasn't chosen by someone else. Then came the lawyer. Ruth recommended her, a sharp woman in her 40s named Neela, who wore red lipstick like armor. I showed her everything. The messages. The necklace with initials that weren't mine. The joint account statements where my name sat silent beneath his transactions. The texts he ignored. The silences he weaponized. Neela looked at me, nodded once and said, "You've got a case. Let's get you your life back." I opened a new account, in just my name. I filed for full custody. Mark never responded to the first notice, or the second. It didn't surprise me. He didn't want a son. He wanted control, and I'd taken that away. I joined a private support group for women like me. We met online every Tuesday. Their stories felt like echoes of my own. Different faces, same hollowing. There was comfort in being seen, in saying things out loud that I once thought were unspeakable. "I forgot how to laugh," one woman said. I did too. Until one afternoon, Elias giggled for the first time. We were in the kitchen. I had flour on my nose. I'd made pancakes shaped, like animals. He giggled when I held one up and said, "This one's a bear." It stopped me cold. His laugh was round and free and real. And in that moment, I realized I didn't miss Mark. Not even a little. I didn't miss the silence disguised as peace, the compliments that came with strings, the man who took everything and called it love. I missed me, and slowly, I was coming back. One night, I wrote another letter to Elias. You won't remember this part. The cottage, the cracked porch steps, the way the wind came through the window like a lullaby. But I will remember all of it, because this was the season I chose to live. You saved me without knowing. And I promise, with everything I am, I will make a life for us that feels like freedom, not survival, not silence, but joy. I kissed his forehead, and for the first time since I met Mark, I felt whole. Not because of a man, not because of revenge, but because I had reclaimed the one thing he never truly saw, me. It wasn't anger that drove me back to the city. It was clarity. A year had passed since I left. A year that felt like both a lifetime and a heartbeat. Elias had grown into a toddler, curious and bright, with the same stubborn chin that marked my mother's side of the family. Every day with him felt like a small, precious victory. But something deep inside me was still unsettled, a quiet ache that reminded me of the life I'd left behind. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about reclaiming my future. So, I drove. To the place that had once felt like home, but now only felt like a memory. The city hadn't changed much. The same traffic lights, the same shops, the same corners where I used to wait for Mark to pick me up after work. But everything was different. I could hear my breath in the stillness of the car as I crossed the city limits, the weight of the past pressing against my ribs like a phantom. I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't the one who had quietly waited for his affection. I wasn't the one who had swallowed her dreams to make room for his. I was someone else now. I met with the lawyer before the mediation. Neela had helped me prepare for this moment, taught me how to hold my ground, how to speak with authority. And when the day arrived, I wasn't nervous. Not even a little. I stood in the courtroom, wearing a simple white blouse, my hair tied back in a loose knot. No makeup, no polished armor. I was enough, just as I was. Mark walked in a few minutes late, his jaw tight and his eyes flickering in my direction. He looked smaller. His suit didn't fit the way it once had, and the arrogance in his posture had faded, replaced by something hollow. He didn't recognize me, at least not the woman he thought he knew. The mediation started, with a few words from the lawyers, but I wasn't there to listen to their legal jargon. I was there to speak for myself. I stood when it was my turn. The words I'd rehearsed in my head for weeks suddenly spilled out, like water breaking from a dam. "Mark," I began, my voice steady but low. "I'm here today because I know who I am. Not because of you, not because of the life we built, but because of what I became when I allowed you to erase me." The room was silent. My voice filled the space, clear and unwavering. I talked about the texts, the way his emotional abandonment had eaten at me, piece by piece. The way he had manipulated me, made me feel small in the name of love. I spoke of the silence he had forced upon me, the hollow days and nights I had spent waiting for affection that never came. I held the papers in my hands, the evidence of his betrayal. But it wasn't the papers that made the impact. It was my voice. Mark's face tightened as he tried to speak, but his words came out garbled, weak. He muttered something about how it wasn't like that, about how I had misunderstood. But his mistress didn't stay. His business had crumbled under the weight of his lies. There was nothing left for him to cling to but his pride, and it was slipping through his fingers. But I wasn't there for his excuses. I was there for Elias. For myself, I spoke of the mother I'd become, of the woman who had learned to stand on her own 2 feet, to laugh again, to breathe again. I talked about how far I had come in a year, how much I had built with nothing but my hands and my heart. I spoke of Elias, of the future I would create for him, not a future defined by the shadow of a man who had never truly seen me. "I'm not asking for revenge," I said, my voice a little louder now. "I'm asking for justice, for my son's future, for my peace." The judge listened, then nodded. The mediation was swift. The outcome was swift, too. Full custody, fair division of assets, public exposure. I walked out of that courthouse holding Elias's hand, the sun warming my back. The weight of the past had finally lifted. Mark didn't say goodbye. Didn't try to stop me. In that moment, I realized I didn't need a confrontation. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need him to acknowledge me. I had everything I needed. That night, I sat in front of my laptop, Elias asleep in the crib beside me. I opened a new file. The words came quickly, flowing from the place where the pain used to be. I began to sketch. The sketches were simple at first, just lines and shapes, but they grew into something else. A story. A visual memoir. It told the story of my erasure and return, the way I had allowed myself to fade into the background, the way I had hidden my dreams to please him. And then, it told the story of how I had found my way back, piece by piece. I uploaded my first sketch to my website and shared it on social media under the pseudonym Salt and Fern. It didn't take long for it to go viral. The messages flooded in. Women, like me, who had been silenced for too long, told me their stories. I wasn't alone. We weren't alone. The sketchbook became my own form of healing. I published the entire visual memoir a month later. It gained traction, and for the first time in my life, I felt seen for all the right reasons. The final step came on a cool morning in the spring. The lake behind my cottage was still, reflecting the pale blue sky like glass. Elias toddled beside me, his tiny fingers brushing the water's edge. I held the old wedding ring in my palm, the symbol of a life I had left behind. For a moment, I thought of Mark, of the man he had been, the man he never would be again. I thought of the hurt, the years spent questioning myself, wondering what I had done wrong. But that was over. I stood at the edge of the lake, the weight of the ring heavy in my hand. And then, I let it go. It sank slowly beneath the surface, the gold gleaming one last time before disappearing. I looked down at Elias, smiling as he reached for the water. The sun warmed my back, and for the first time in years, I felt free. Not because of the ring, not because of revenge, but because I had found my way back. I wasn't the woman who had disappeared. I was the woman who had returned.